Hi, good morning, folks. If you are here for our chat about public financing and affordable housing, please go ahead and have a seat. We'd love to go ahead and get started with our chat. My name is Emily Northrup. I'm a grants administrator here at the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our conversation this morning. And I am going to go ahead and get started and turn it over to our fantastic panel. Real quick before I do that, 2 notes of housekeeping. We are not packed to the gills yet, but if we notice this room start to fill up, I'd ask you to be considerate of other folks as they come in and maybe scooch towards the middle so some of those aisle seats are available. And we'll have some time for question and answer. We can do that 2 ways. If you'd like to enter them into the chat option or the question and answer option on the app, I'm happy to read them for you, or we have a microphone up at the front of the room. You're welcome to make your way up when it's that time during our session. So we have our panelists. We've got Loretta at the end. She works with Parkview Services East. Kathleen Hosfeld with Homestead Community Land Trust. Colleen Robinson with the Habitat for Clallam County. And Rebecca Wold, the Director of Real Estate Partnerships, Habitat for Humanity at Seattle, King, and Kittitas counties. I'd love to go ahead and turn it over. Thank you so much for being with us, and let's give our panelists a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. As our lovely room host informed you, I am Colleen Robinson. I am with Habitat for Humanity of Clallam County on the beautiful Olympic Peninsula. We are considered rural and an intermediate size Habitat affiliate, and have definitely could not do what we do without public funding. So I'm going to turn it over to you. We're going to share a mic.
Okay, great. I'm Kathleen Hosfeld. I'm the CEO and Executive Director at Homestead Community Land Trust, and we operate primarily in King County, but we are also acting to support the establishment of a community land trust in the Hilltop neighborhood of Tacoma in Pierce County as well.
All right, is this on? Yes, it is. I'm Rebecca Wold. I am the Director of Real Estate Development at Habitat for Humanity, Seattle, King, and Kittitas counties. We have about 300 homes in our development pipeline. We build everything from single family, not as much of that, to townhouse and multifamily condo buildings. So as Kathleen mentioned, this would not be possible without public funding being part of our capital stack. I'm excited to talk to you today about how public funding can be used in permanently affordable homeownership.
Thank you. My name is Loretta Kale. I am the Director of Homeownership with Parkview Services. So we provide HUD-certified housing counseling, financial education, and down payment assistance to support homeownership. And public funding in our world looks like down payment assistance. And so we're going to speak to a different model. So you've got 3 different options of affordable homeownership today. So this is an exciting panel to be on. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, ladies. Just so everyone's sure they're in the right session, our learning objectives are learn the essential aspects of seeking and maintaining public funding from planning to strategy, hear from seasoned experts and the knowledge of the funds available, how to best layer them, which pairs best together, and lessons learned. Build suitable public funding programs at your agencies. So with that, I'm going to dive into the questions I'm going to ask, and we're going to go down the line. And I might change the order now and again, but for now, I'm going to start with you. How does planning contribute to your success, and tell us what your tools and processes are?
Okay, so in terms of planning, Homestead has a development pipeline of about 240 homes, and that's about 9 different projects. And we need to think and plan ahead about how to sequence our funding applications so that they have a chance of success. There, as you may or may not know, there's limited dollars for homeownership pretty much everywhere. We're blessed to be in the city of Seattle, where I think 80% of our homes in trust are are built in Seattle. So we've had the advantage of having Seattle Housing Levy dollars as part of our capital stacks. But everywhere we go, we also apply for State of Washington Housing Trust Fund funds. But those are limited, generally speaking, every year to a finite amount. And so part of our planning is to anticipate if there's going to be a constraint on how many of our projects we can submit at a time, or the dollar amount that we total dollar amount we'll be asking for. We have to think about those things, and we have to sequence our activities accordingly so that we don't ask for too much at one time. Most funding sources try to spread the money out. The state has the most buckets it has to cover: rural, urban, and then different types of homeownership projects. So we have to really think about and be aware of what else is happening in the state as well. So from a planning standpoint, we're always, and I would just add that for a while there was this sort of dampening effect of the lack of funding at the state level. I've lived through 3 years. I think it was 2013, 2014, and 15, when there were $0 for homeownership from the Housing Trust Fund. And so that had this dampening effect of, like, why even try to build if there isn't going to be funding? And so what we adopted was the philosophy of, like, no, we're going to create demand. We're going to show there's demand. And I think the Department of Commerce, as our allies, understands that there is far more demand than there is funding for our projects. And so we're just going to keep queuing up projects, getting them ready for funding. So that's how we have to plan ahead and think about both the constraints as well as the opportunities for funding. And did you want me to go into question 2? No. Okay.
So Kathleen covered some of the things that I would address as well. At the very earliest stage of a project, we need to be looking at what the available sources of funding will be. We want to make sure before we commit even to start spending money that there will be a viable path for that project, and we need to know what that looks like, what the form of development would be, what funding sources are available. Also, as Kathleen mentioned, you have to consider that there is limited funding. It's also sometimes on a biennial cycle, so you need to know what year might be your best chance for being funded for whatever projects are your highest priority. So you're going to put those all in a priority order, and your funders are going to ask you for that. So not only what your highest priorities are that year, when you plan to break ground. So this will definitely impact how you prioritize projects. The funders want to be, especially at the state level, want to be the last in. As Kathleen mentioned, we are fortunate in Seattle. They actually will commit very early in a project, but something to consider is that money doesn't actually come to you until you're permitted. So while you can have that commitment, and that does help you have some security, you still are, as an organization, going to be spending money to get to the point where you can actually bring that grant funding in. And and then there are other benchmarks later that you may not be able to close with some funders until you're actually ready to break ground. So considering all of those factors, you put things as an organization in your priority order, and you make your best shot each year at what you think is possible and a little more. Because the last thing I'll say is that many of the funders consider projects that have previously applied and been unsuccessful in prioritizing the next year. So every year you apply for everything. Even though you think some of those may not get funded that year, you need to get them in the pipeline for the funder as well. I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so planning looks a little bit different when we don't have to break ground. So we can be a little closer to timing and when we need to use the resources, but they're limited. So we may apply for Housing Trust Fund down payment assistance in support of the population we serve, which is people with disabilities, and the awesome opportunity they have to become homeowners. But every round is different, and the requirements for each round are different. And so it may be this round we're going to specifically look for populations that live in a rural community, or populations that are underserved, or populations that have had no exposure to home ownership. And so we may have the same grant opportunities, but we may not meet that same mission each year or each time that round of funding becomes available. And so we need to, my goal in this is to be 2 years ahead of what's coming, really. I need to be able to prepare my team to make sure that we're adequately staffed, but that we understand the focus of what grant opportunities are going to be on the horizon, so that we're not missing any chance to benefit somebody that's never had access to home ownership. The other thing that we use as tools is education. So it's very important that we get people ready. Maybe they can't buy now. Maybe I don't have funding for down payment assistance today. But if I can get them ready, so let's begin the process. Let's work on getting a credit score. Let's work on a savings history. So part of that process for me is educating consumers that when the time is right, when interest rates are right, when the money's available, that you're ready to go. You're not just starting the process, because in 6 months when you're ready, the money may not be there. So it's very important that I have the right staff, that I understand what's coming, and that I'm able to use the tools to get people ready for when we can pull that trigger.
Before you jump on, can I make one last point?
Always.
One thing that we have that I think is really amazing, but it also is a planning and strategy challenge, is that our funders do tend to coordinate. They coordinate their applications, they coordinate their decisions. I think this is really powerful because you're going to need multiple funders in every project to make it work. But it does mean that the funding cycles are once a year, right? So not only does that mean that all your grants will be due, thank goodness they're all done, once a year, but it also means that you're going to get all your decisions once a year, and then you're not going to have another opportunity for another year to have funding come in. So we know this and we plan ahead, but it does mean that all of your accessibility to those funds, even once you're granted those funds, are going to be kind of clumped into parts of the year, and you need to have capacity in your organization to contract those funds and then draw from them, because that's how you're actually going to get the projects done. So keep that part in mind, that the first part is winning the grant, but the second piece, or winning the funding, second piece is making sure that you can actually contract and administer it.
And I would say from a rural affiliate, Habitat built 38 homes since 1993, and we are about to embark on 100 homes. So 250 home communities that we're bringing online now. And I feel, thank you. I feel a little bit like we're building the boat as we're paddling down the river, because for many of you in the audience, it's a huge learning curve. We did receive $2 million from Washington Commerce for a CHIP grant, which is Connecting Housing to Infrastructure Program. Has to be done through a jurisdiction. They have to apply for the grant, then they administer the grant. And much like Rebecca said, you don't get the money until you go to the permitting phase. And so you still need that money to break the ground and do different infrastructure things, so be prepared. Question 2, share about the public funds your agency utilizes and what your experience has been with them. Be nice, because they might be in the audience. What requirements come with various public funds that people need to be aware of? AMI. Which layer well with others? Any lessons learned about funding sources that required special attention? And I'm going to start down at the other end with Loretta.
All right. So my layering, I love this question, because this is like one of my favorite topics. Is there has been historically some pushback from people that say, with housing prices increasing, and interest rates, I'm sorry, but I've been doing this a long time. Interest rates below 7%, we're not high, but I get it. So interest rates in the high 6s or low 7s. So how does that create affordable home ownership? That isn't going to make a dent. So what we have to talk about is, how do we work together as nonprofits, as for-profits, as government agencies, to partner what we do in order to achieve the goal of not just obtaining affordable home ownership, but sustaining it right? So we don't just create one puddle that we all jump through and get our boots kind of wet. We have to create a path of opportunity, and that's what layering does. And that's where the use of private and public funds works together to create that goal. A lot of the majority of the households that we serve, homeownership would never have been a dream. Not a pipe dream, not a kitchen conversation, not a lottery winning. It wasn't anywhere near the thought process. And so when that is offered to them, they're afraid of it, right? They get imposter syndrome. We have to help guide them through the reality of what that is. And so by the layering of partnerships, maybe some teach education in financial, maybe some help understand the real estate part of it. We partner with other nonprofits to layer our down payment. If they're not coming from the same fund, then maybe now I can get 100. Like the CHIP, the Covenant Homeownership Program, we can layer with that. Maybe you get 100 from that or 100 from that. And together, all of those things can create affordable homeownership. And it's a one-shot deal. So unlike we're giving people maybe a public voucher to get a rental that they're going to have to renew every 12 months. You don't have to report your income to anyone in 12 months. You own that home. You paint that house. You plant those flowers. You don't tell me about anything except your success stories and pass it forward. And so when I talk about layering public and private and creating that path forward, it takes a village. It takes a whole state full of villages. And I love Washington State because we are so collaborative and we're so supportive of what each other does that we tell the most stories at HUD. In Washington, D.C., Mark and I were there with Parkview Services a couple of weeks ago, and everybody knows about Washington State. So that tells you about the impact of the work we do here in supporting everybody's right to own their own home.
So we use a lot of different, we access whatever funding is available for each project, we will apply. So the big ones, Kathleen's already mentioned some. So there's the state, Commerce has the Housing Trust Fund. That is a big one. Sometimes your city will have available public funding. Seattle does. We've accessed public funding from Ellensburg. There are regional coalitions like ARCH and SCIP. There's also King County has available funding applications to their housing finance program. So those are kind of the big ones. There's some smaller ones as well, and sometimes you can access federal funding as well. You need to have an eye towards what that funding source is going to require of you. The obvious ones are, what's the affordability level that you need to meet? Is it 80%? Is it 50%? Is it 60%? Can you afford to take that funding? If it's at the lower level, can you meet it? Can you find homeowners that qualify and could still afford what you're producing? There's also, sometimes there's items with that relate back to costs. So is prevailing wage tied to this source of funding? What level of prevailing wage is it? Is it federal prevailing wage? Is it state prevailing wage? Is it commercial or residential? You need to look at that because that will impact your costs. Also, some sources of funds come with additional environmental review like NEPA. So that also can be just a planning issue. It's definitely something, all of these things are things we have accommodated in some of our projects, but not every one of them could sustain all of those requirements. So just keeping in mind those things, what's available, what the requirements are, how that impacts your bottom line for your project. Those are the kind of the high level considerations.
Thank you. Picking up where Rebecca left off, we think in terms of the capital stack, we need to have at least 2 sources, because when we go to build a home and subsidize it for people who make less than 80% of area median income, our cost to build that home is going to be somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000. So paying all the materials, paying the labor, but we need to get it down to, in King County, a price between $275,000 and $340,000 to work for a permanent affordability in our program. So we've got to come up with that amount of subsidy, well, that might be up to $300,000 per home. The advantage of permanent affordability is that public funders only put that money in one time on the first sale, and then all that money revolves forward and gains value over time. But still, coming up with that $300,000 or $250,000, whatever it is, takes multiple sources. And that's where it becomes tricky, because you want to harmonize all the different requirements of the funders. Recently, we as a state worked together among the homeownership focused organizations to make sure that the state's definition of a first-time homebuyer was the same as the federal definition of first-time homebuyer, because when we had different funding sources that said something different, it made it difficult to work across and harmonize all the funds. Our worst case scenario was our first phase of our Willowcrest project in Renton. We had 11 different sources. And we did that because at the time, our local source was not funding at a very high level. I'm happy to say that many of the funders now are realizing that the cost of construction is very high, and that they really do need to be thinking about per home amounts that take into account the increased cost of building a new home and keeping it permanently affordable. So folks are starting to step up, but at the time, both state and county levels of funding that when we did Willowcrest 2 just weren't there. And so I joke that we did car washes and bake sales in order to fund Willowcrest. It was not quite that bad, but almost that bad. But then we started talking about that experience, and people started paying attention. I have to say, the city of Seattle, we're really blessed to be in the city of Seattle, because they are always the leader. They always are paying attention to these things, and they lead the industry in setting per home amounts and per project amounts. So more of that, please. We're really grateful to them. The other things that you need to be aware of, so a lot of the compliance requirements are very similar. First-time home buyer, live in the home as your primary residence, and certain things about what you can use the home for. All of those are generally accepted among funders, but sometimes some funders have compliance requirements that we consider to be onerous. And so you as an organization need to think about, right, I'm going to look at both the process of getting the funds, the documentation that you have to submit to get your money. I'm not going to out the two sources that are really hard to work with in that regard for us, but there are some where you have to work so hard to document and give all the pieces that people need. We have to scan barcodes of the appliances that you put in to prove that you actually put them in the home. It's just you have to think about, as a small organization particularly, is that worth it? Is that sometimes the money's too expensive, right? And so every year folks come around and say, hey, there's these congressional set-asides. Don't you want your legislator, your federal legislator to get you a set-aside? And sorry, it's HUD money, and HUD comes with these really hard compliance requirements. So you want to think about, are we up for that? Is this money too expensive, and is there a different way to get it? So I'll pass back to you.
One more thing. Sorry.
Always,
I'm the queen
Rebecca.
of this.
Rebecca has one more thing.
I think the other thing that we haven't mentioned that is really key is permanent affordability means you're stewarding it permanently. And as Kathleen mentioned, you only get funding at the beginning. You may be able to work with your lenders to get down payment assistance for future buyers, but it's not going to pay for your time, your team. And there is a lot of compliance requirements in that, and that duration is 25 to 50 years or longer. We commit to longer than that, but so that duration isn't as big an issue. But you do, again, going back to smaller, bigger, how large your organization is, you have to have the staff and capacity to work with the homeowners and to work with those buyers as you have to requalify and manage that over the long haul.
And I would say we applied for, they've been called many things, earmarks, congressional set-asides, community-funded projects. And we were awarded $2 million, which we were so excited. That's going to help us with our infrastructure. We had a groundbreaking. We had Representative Kilmer come out. And when the budget was finally written, which was not something that I fully understood, we only got 800,000. So be prepared, even if you get a yes at the beginning, as time goes on and budgets and things happen, that funding can be reduced. So like everyone has said here, keep looking for money all the time. The more, the better. I think we kind of answered number 3. We did want to see if there were any questions from the audience before I go to the final question. So does anybody have any questions or burning desire to know more about what we're doing here? Come on up.
Hello, everyone. So my question really is, there's a lot of communities out there that are so interested in what is happening around permanent, affordable home ownership, but they don't know how to bring you guys to their community. What do you suggest are some things that they need to do before you even, I know that many of you will start the meetings, start the engagement and what have you, but if they want to be prepared and make sure that you're coming into a place where you could likely develop and be successful, what are some strategies or what are some things that they need to execute to ensure that that happens?
Great. Thank you so much for that question. So there are a variety of communities, as you know, Cheryl, that want home ownership in their communities, and they're facing this daunting task of, do we have to become housing developers ourselves? Maybe they don't want to do that. How can they bring affordable home ownership in? Or they do want to become housing developers, but you don't have the standing to necessarily apply.
Can
Yes.
I clarify?
Yeah.
These are communities that are particularly interested in not being housing
Not being.
developers. They don't have that capacity.
Yeah.
But they want to partner with developers that have morals, integrity, that
Absolutely.
do what they say they're going to do, so they don't feel like they got taken advantage of. But
Yeah,
they want to make
and-
sure that they're being good partners.
Yes.
One of the things that I've heard from community members from Shoreline to North Tacoma is that they don't want to present as if they're complaining and asking, but they don't have funding. They don't have anything attached to them. So what are some tangible things that they can do to show they're putting skin in the game?
Right. So what I would say to that is, I think our work with Skyway is a great model of that. And Cheryl is a leader in the Skyway community and has demonstrated exactly what they need to do, which is to build a coalition to bring community voices together to advocate on behalf of home ownership and to be able to speak with one voice. One of the challenges that we face, Homestead has made itself available to communities of color and people at high risk of displacement. So those areas that are going to gentrify like this, we've said, hey, we're available. If you want to be working with us, just let us know. But it takes more than just one concerned person coming forward. We don't. We need to know that this is the will of the community. So building that neighborhood coalition and bringing together the voices at the table that will advocate and have some staying power. We had the benefit in working with the community of Skyway of COVID happened, and we were just beginning our conversation with Skyway, and nobody could go anywhere. So we did all the community organizing online during COVID to create a shared strategic plan and to get our MOU established as an accountability measure with the community. So that's a model, and we'd love to talk to anybody about that is interested. Okay. But it really is bringing together a coalition of voices. It can be current homeowners who want that for other folks, or it can be people with lived experience who are still renting and really struggling with being cost burdened, who want that homeownership experience. What we need to see is that it's the will of the community.
Okay, that sounds good. I guess I wanted to add, in addition to working together as a community with a development partner on a particular development, that could be about coming together as a community to create opportunities for people to know what's out there and available and how they might become ready to apply.
Okay.
We work with community partners throughout the community. The Urban League comes to mind because they have a homeowner program,
Yeah.
and we go and present to them what opportunities are available, how they can qualify for a Habitat home in one of our developments. And then our website shows all those developments, but our community partners have the opportunity to present those opportunities first so that their communities can be ready
Right, that
early,
makes sense.
sometimes if they need extra preparation. So I think sometimes it could be just about, calling the organizations that are available and presenting those opportunities, maybe a housing fair,
Yeah.
so that people can learn about how they might qualify. They might not even know they could. And Loretta's going to probably speak more to that as well.
Okay.
The thing that I have found is that the best information that prospective home buyers get is from their own community.
Very true.
Because there's trust.
Yeah.
And so infiltrating that circle of trust is the most important thing. So if you as an advocate for your community want to attend a housing fair, an education workshop, a 5-hour home buyer class, and then bring that information back so that that trust is built. Hey, look, I took this class and I really trusted these people and they had good information. What if I allowed them to come and talk to our group for 15 minutes? What if we opened up a question and answer session? I think the biggest struggle for homeownership is people, again, not understanding that they can.
Right.
So the why is the biggest thing that we can help with.
Okay.
Is we talk about creating generational wealth. Generational wealth is not going to be created by building you a house.
Right.
It's going to be by providing education, by providing internal fortitude, right? The self-confidence that comes with you doing that, achieving that goal, or even making that first step. And now your legacy is going to be, I did it.
Right.
And there we begin creating generational wealth.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I would say having an organization that's willing to be the convener, much like my friend said here, is really important. Someone that is trusted. Seattle King County, I know that on their website, yes, many of us have websites for our organizations, but they also have a separate website, which is Home Buyer Ready website, with a lot of information on there for people to really go look at and start to understand what is required, what do I have to do, and give some people some really thinking. So props to you guys for starting a Home Buyer website. Any other questions
Thank
out
you.
there?
We have some from the chat. With such a pressing need for affordable housing here in Washington State, how can community land trusts more rapidly take land off the speculative market to better maintain affordability?
I love that question.
You're welcome for it.
Who wants to go first?
All we need is money, honey. Just give us the money, we'll do it. Yeah. So, a few years back, I'll just tell a quick story. A few years back, I was invited to be part of one of these social venture pitch fests. And so I was talking about permanently affordable homeownership through a community land trust model. And I was competing with all kinds of other social benefit organizations. And one of the coaches, after my pitch, said, "That's too capital intensive." And I was like, seriously, I can't even go there with you. Okay, so you don't want to put very much capital into something that's going to be completely transformative for this family. Let's just revisit. I don't want to be too inflammatory about it, but many of the people who built this country have been shut out systematically of the opportunity to buy a home, and the capital accumulations that now sit in a minority of hands, it's a rounding error. it's a rounding error on their balance sheets to unleash some of that capital to make these affordable home ownership opportunities possible. So I'm not going to apologize about it being a capital intensive model. We need the money. It needs to come to people who will steward it on behalf of the community and build that community wealth in addition to individual wealth.
I can't follow that. I absolutely, 100%. I think there are some bright lights and opportunities. It doesn't happen as often as it should, where we can partner with a community-minded organization or a church that might own land and really want to see that go into permanently affordable home ownership. That's been a really great opportunity. And with Washington having statewide legislation now and some local jurisdictions adopting it that upzone, the available development capacity of church land when it goes to affordable housing is helping that. So I think that's one opportunity that's out there. But to Kathleen's point, sometimes that puts a disproportionate burden on churches that, like, they have, if those are black churches, then they're going to be dispossessed of land for them to achieve this goal, or we have to employ some really creative structures to make it happen. So those are very complicated deals. And we make them happen because they need to, because land is scarce and it's too expensive. There have been also some opportunities on the open market, and having available, ready, low interest acquisition financing is key. Seattle has a program that can do that. The state has a program that can do that, which is really great, but doesn't have enough money in it for home ownership. So back to money, but the acquisition can be something, in home ownership, you're gonna buy that out. That's not gonna be in there forever. So that is a temporary, if that is a temporary low interest loan, like 1%, like the state offers, that's the ideal, that the next best thing to getting a grant that can do the same thing.
And I would add, I'm sorry, Loretta, just 3 words: education, education, education. The land lease model is new, and my own board still doesn't get it, no matter how much we talk about it. So really clear, concise education that, yes, maybe they won't have as much equity as if they own the land in the end, but it's certainly better than being a renter for life and having no equity at all. So.
Okay, so
Thanks,
I'm going to
Loretta.
just, I want to speak to just one other thing with this, and that is you've got to be involved with your community partners, your legislation. Know who your mayor is, know who your city council members are, know who votes, know where they vote, know what they're talking about. You can't just come in and say, I'm going to develop or I'm going to build. In Eastern Washington, we don't have these options. I was a part of the Mayor's Quality Task Force in 2016. So Paul's in here, we know about that. We proposed all of this. We want a land bank. We want a community land trust. We want these opportunities. We spent almost a year together as a group of people in the community that could make a difference. And we had the most wonderful proposals, and we took them all to the mayor and everybody. And then guess what happens when re-elections occur, right? What a waste of time. Let's quit wasting each other's time. Let's talk about what we're going to do and do what we say and understand why we're doing it, and quit putting our needs ahead of the community that we serve. So if there's a need in a place like Eastern Washington for a community land trust, let's build it. Let's do this. So yeah, I bring that support from Eastern Washington. Yes.
I do. Affordable homeownership is crucial in closing the racial wealth gap. How do community land trusts and habitat homes facilitate wealth building without the limitations of traditional homeownership?
I'm not sure what
How do community land trusts and habitat homes facilitate wealth building with the limitations that traditional homeownership does not have?
So let me just say what our model is that we set a base price for each home that is the cost that it costs us to build that home minus all public subsidy we can bring to bear on that project. That's the minimum that our home buyers need to qualify for, so that kind of sets that bottom threshold. But from there, and the top threshold is whatever, 80% AMI and less. So within that range, the home buyer has other qualifications that they'll meet, but in terms of building wealth, they will buy their home at what they can afford, which will be no more than 1/3 of their household income. And then that price that they bought that home for, they will earn 1.5% a year in equity on that amount. Whenever they want to sell, then we have the option to buy it back, but they can sell it for that price that's set by that calculation. So that is one way that they can build equity, is that they'll have that equity. And you're right, this is a balance. People who buy on the open market don't have a limitation on their equity. They get to benefit from whatever the market is doing, which has been insane in recent years. So this is different. What we're balancing here is equity building with long-term affordability and community benefit. And that's what our funding requires, but it's also that compromise, that this is that middle, get your foot in the door, anchor yourself, build yourself that nest egg that allows you to either move up into the market or pass it down to your kids so they have a secure place to live. And you get all the benefits of homeownership that come with that. The other benefits, your rent isn't going to go up every month. You know what your housing expenses will be. You're going to be in a secure place that others cannot dispossess you of because they sold the building. So you are experiencing many of the benefits that will help with your long-term security as a family, that will help build your family's trajectory as you go forward. So I think it's the compromise position to build us towards where we really need to be.
Let me say one thing to that. So here's another way we can do this, by partnering down payment assistance to somebody that's buying in Habitat or CLT. Now they're going to put more of their dollars toward the first mortgage, right? So they've got down payment assistance that works as a silent second. So it's deferred till they sell, 30 years, move, relocate, refinance. The more dollars that you can put in today's money, right? Our dollar's worth less today than it will tomorrow than it will be today. Toward the first mortgage, the quicker you're going to grow whatever equity position that is. So even if it's a limited equity position, the faster you grow it, the more real it becomes. And there again, we begin creating generational wealth.
I want to address, there's two different problems we're trying to solve, right? So And I just want to acknowledge my positionality in this. I'm a white leader. We have really high BIPOC participation in our program, but I just acknowledge that place. When we have this conversation about shouldn't it be the case that people of color should have equal access to the opportunity to purchase a market rate home as other people have had? Full stop. Absolutely. Yes, unequivocally, everyone should have equal access to opportunity. And the fact that folks have been shut out of that opportunity is one of the stains on our country, frankly. So just full stop, no argument there. But community land trust home ownership is trying to solve access to home ownership, but also trying to solve a different problem, which is that the market economy for housing, particularly in Washington State, is broken. It is not working for anybody right now, except for the very wealthy. So we've just published this little infomercial. We just published the closed doors report this month, and we were shocked to find that the median price of a home in many counties exceeds even 120% AMI households. So when you have a market like that, and Emily Alvarado, I don't know if she's in the room, but as one of our state legislators, she has said, look, when the market can't provide a home at a price that a median household can afford, that is a market failure. So that is the problem that community land trusts are trying to solve, is we're trying to create an alternate economy for housing that does price homes below median income and to keep them affordable. And as Rebecca was saying, you know, we don't mean to be a solution for everything. We are not going to right the wrong of people being shut out, of being able to participate in the market equally. But what we can do is we can look to the justice of an affordable home ownership economy where everybody can get their first home. Your first home doesn't necessarily have to be your last home. And so you can get out of being cost burdened by your rent. You can get it into an ownership position, and in 10 years, you can graduate to market rate home ownership if that's what you choose. So this is a strategy. You have to think about it, and that's what I tell home buyers. Think about this as a strategy to get out from under being cost burdened by your rent into an ownership position, and then you can move up from there. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, we have a question.
I have a question. So I love numbers and specificity. So it would be really cool in the community land trust, as you're talking about affordability, is if you could give an example. Like, so if somebody, let's say 10 years ago, got into a community land trust, what are they still paying for their annual mortgage-ish? And if somebody gets into one today, what is the cost that they're paying for their total, and when I say mortgage, I mean all the things that go into that, insurance, all those things.
PITI.
Versus like a rent, just for it's like comparison for those that are working on the money side. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Who's got those numbers at the top of their head?
Not exact, but just like ish, you know?
Yeah, there's some folks in the audience that might be able to answer this better, but so I just did a presentation. I may quote these numbers wrong, and I'm happy to put the information out later and correct the record, but we were doing like, what's the principal and interest payment, what's total housing payment for somebody at 70% AMI in a home, and what's like 60% AMI, because we try to income average so that we're getting people at different incomes. And I think the principal and interest payment for the 60% AMI is like $2,000 or less. Actually, Ali would be a really good person to answer this question. And for 70% AMI, it's more like $2,400 a month. So in King County, we've got folks paying $2,600, $2,800 a month for their rent, and that's building no equity. And so if you can get in even at the same amount or less, and many of our buyers are paying less for their ownership than they were paying for their rent, you're ahead, ahead of the game.
Is this on? Yeah, okay. So again, let's talk about how we sustain affordability, right? So maybe they can afford it when they get in, but maybe there's a job loss. Maybe if there's a death in the family. Maybe somebody becomes disabled. And now that income is reduced or cut in half. So what do we do then? So the benefit that we have of providing housing counseling along with these resources is that we can then go in and modify that mortgage payment. We can create a reduction to what that payment is to maintain its affordability by working with their loan servicer. Whoever they get their mortgage from is not servicing their loan, right? That's the initial funder. Whoever is servicing that long-term 30-year note is the one that they fear. And we have to understand the value of connection. So connecting a housing counselor to these clients from day one, that they understand that this is a 30-year partnership, that you're not just getting a home, you're getting a team of people that value you and will help this this home remain affordable. Again, being able to layer resources. We closed a home in Deer Park, Habitat, 2 summers ago. There were a father, and he took care of his 2 sons with disabilities. There were 3 SSI checks in the house. Total income of $1,561. They have a mortgage of less than $700. We layered $145,000 in down payment assistance, and after closing, got them the real estate tax exemption. They pay 0 real estate taxes on that property. Could they ever rent for that? And you know what? They have a housing counselor. I just talked to him last week. His son has an issue. What if he's not able to stay in the house? Like, these are the kind of questions that they have. They have a partner for life. Really, they do.
I love the passion. I feel like I keep following the passion and with the less. But anyway, what I do want to say is that what we're building right now costs us more than what we were building 10, 12, 15 years ago. And so actually, where you see the dramatic impact, again, Ollie's in the audience, keep mentioning him, he's the head of our homeowner services team, but when he was talking about a resale we had come up in the Issaquah Highlands that was built like 10 years ago, it was shockingly affordable compared to the current cost that we have of building right now. But even what we're producing now, the mortgages or the cost, just the overall cost of the total amount, not the monthly cost, is like less than a third of what's on the market, sometimes lower than that, depending on the neighborhood. So really, it's a dramatic difference when you're talking about this model because we're bringing public subsidy in. So we're talking about reducing that cost forevermore on that home for future buyers. But where you see it is that long-term effect, and not just on the costs. So when you can compare something we built 10, 12 years ago at a cheaper cost to what's being sold now or built now, but also what happens with the children that grow up in that security. That's something we're not talking about here as much, but that is a huge thing too, because being able to grow up in a secure housing environment is one of the biggest factors that predetermine future success.
I think we have a few moments for closing remarks, or if you have one final question. But I do want to just go ahead and thank you, ladies, so much for taking the time and the opportunity to share all of your resources with us. It's been a fascinating conversation.
I'd say dive into the deep end of public funding. Do it. And look to people like these people here on the stage for support. Use your network, use your community, reach out to people, but go ahead and do it, are my final thoughts.
I encourage all of you who are just at the starting point of homeownership capacity building to join things like Housing Development Consortium has a homeownership affinity group. That is a monthly opportunity for you to network with other homeownership providers. You know, join HDC, obviously, but join our affinity groups. There are other groups. Northwest Community Land Trust Coalition, you can join as an individual member. We have meetings and professional development. So just get into the community. I think you'll find that everybody in this world is very helpful and supportive and wants to support people who are just getting involved. We need to build a deeper bench. We need more people who are knowledgeable. We need more people on the field. So just connect and network your fannies off.
Stole my punchline again. I do think connections are really important, and that everyone, I have learned so much from listening to other people, from talking to other people. There's a lot of knowledge and a lot of helpful people out there, so don't ever feel shy about reaching out. When I was in graduate school for real estate development, they only had exactly one class on affordable housing development. They didn't even mention homeownership, by the way. But what they did do is they had this computer model where you could pull some levers to reach a feasible development, which, by the way, was really hard. It is hard. It does take a lot of learning and cooperation to build capacity in this arena and to build up your organization to be able to even apply for some of these funders. Partnerships can be a way for building that capacity. So if you partner with a more experienced developer or nonprofit, that could be a way for you to go through one cycle and learn how it works and get your organization to where it needs to be to do that on your own the next cycle. So it's something to think about.
Okay, so on the ending note, I started selling real estate in 1982. Okay, we had 3 loan programs. FHA, VA, 20% down. Which one do you want? There was no mortgage insurance. We have so many amazing tools available to home buyers today. But I can tell you the one thing that has never, ever changed, and that is responsible home ownership. So we required that you make no more than 35% of your gross income went to your mortgage expense. That is still true today, okay? So what we're doing with all of these models of affordable home ownership is maintaining the affordability factor for the long term. We're not just saying, oh, hey, look, I got my computer to say you're approved for a loan. That does not sustain home ownership. It takes a village of builders, counselors, financiers, but most importantly, community support, like, again, within their own community that says you can do this. Have trust and faith in yourself and know that you also deserve a home of your own.
Let's hear it for the panelists today. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for our room host.
Thank you so much, guys, for joining us today for our conversation. If you have an opportunity to fill out the session feedback form in the Whova app, that really helps conference organizers know what you found valuable. And so if you enjoyed the conversation, if you learned something, if you found our wonderful panel of speakers engaging, please let us know. That feedback is really, really helpful when we plan next year's Housing Washington, and we hope to see you all there. So thank you so much. Time for lunch, and Kevin Adler.